Welcome to this explainer. I'm Procopius. Yeah, the historian who literally saw all of this go down with my own two eyes and, well, wrote it down for you. Today, we're going to get into a story that is, quite frankly, pretty dark. Actually, it honestly plays out like a pitch-black comedy about how the greatest, most powerful empire on the face of the earth got bullied and totally humiliated, like a weak kid in a schoolyard. If you're one of those people who believes that kings, emperors, and superpowers are completely in control of their own destinies, well, prepare to have your convictions entirely shattered. We're going to look at how God exalts nations and then just humbles them in the absolute blink of an eye, and how human arrogance completely collapses when faced with the hidden soldiers of heaven. So, are you ready?
Okay, let's dive into this. Picture this scenario for a second. You've got Emperor Justinian, the absolute, unquestioned ruler of the mighty Eastern Roman Empire. This was a man who genuinely believed he owned the entire world. I stood there personally and watched this man pay the Persian king Khosrow 5,000 pounds of solid gold, plus an additional 500 pounds every single year. And you might be wondering, why? Well, it wasn't some brilliant strategic trade investment, no. It was, quite simply, to get the Persian king to just stop embarrassing him. Justinian was literally paying a rival superpower their equivalent of pocket money just to avoid getting beaten up. It is the absolute peak of humiliation for an empire that totally prided itself on being invincible.
Section 1. Khosrow humiliates the Roman Empire.
Just think about the sheer absurdity of how this played out back in 540 AD. King Khosrow of the Sassanid Empire was a guy with this brilliantly sarcastic, almost cruel intellect. He realized that Justinian's mighty armies were completely tied down in the West, fighting these incredibly exhausting wars in Italy and North Africa. So what did Khosrow do? He decided to take a little summer vacation. But, this was a violent, bloody, and incredibly casual vacation right through the Eastern Roman Empire. The timeline is just nuts. He doesn't just invade and burn the great city of Antioch to the ground. No, he casually strolls down to the coast to symbolically bathe in the waters of the Mediterranean, basically just to prove he could. He passes through cities extorting massive amounts of silver. And honestly, the absolute funniest, darkest part of this whole shebang? He actually stops to attend the local chariot races. He intentionally intervenes and rigs the results so that the blue team loses. Why? Because the blue team was Emperor Justinian's favorite. He was treating the greatest empire on earth like a complete joke, literally going out of his way to troll the Roman emperor in front of his own people.
I remember writing these words down feeling genuinely nauseous from the sheer shock of what I was witnessing. I wrote, I became dizzy writing this. Why should it be God's will to exalt a man or a place and then obliterate him without any clear reason? It's a truth we constantly try to ignore, right? No matter how massive an empire's military is, no matter how much gold they hoard away, God has the absolute power to exalt whom he wills and humble whom he wills without any warning whatsoever. It just leaves human ambition looking entirely pathetic when faced with divine will.
Section 2. Belisarius's Great Bluff.
And this brilliantly illustrates how deception can totally triumph over sheer force. Right in the middle of this catastrophic humiliation, a totally desperate Justinian sent his best general, Belisarius, to fix the mess. But let's be real. Belisarius was essentially sent with a prayer for a miracle, because the local Roman troops were completely shattered, demoralized, and totally depleted. So when Khosrow sent his envoy over to assess the Roman strength, Belisarius staged arguably the greatest piece of military theater in history. He hid all of his sick, exhausted men, kept them totally out of sight. Instead, he placed these massive, towering guys from Thrace, Illyria, and Gothia right at the very front. He armed them to the teeth and told them to act completely carefree. As if they were just out on a weekend hunting trip and couldn't care less that a massive Persian army was breathing down their necks. The Persian envoy took one look at these fearless giants, completely panicked, and ran straight back to tell King Khosrow that the Romans had secretly assembled an invincible, terrifying army.
And it worked. The Persians retreated with astonishing speed. To the average observer, it totally looked like Belisarius had pulled off a legendary victory through a simple trick. But here is the massive twist. The reality that actually sent the Persians running wasn't just the sight of a few tall guards. No way. Khosrow had discovered something far, far more terrifying sweeping through the empire. A silent, microscopic monster was quietly crawling through the Roman borders, and it was about to change the world forever.
Section 3. Nature's Wrath and Heavenly Signs. Before this microscopic monster truly unleashed its terror, there were some seriously ominous signs. Back in the year 536 AD, This terrifying atmospheric veil covered the Earth. It made the sun shine without any real brightness, almost like a year-long eclipse. It was a true sign of nature's wrath, a literal warning from heaven.
Because you see, the true enemy didn't carry swords, and it certainly didn't negotiate. We're talking about a deadly bacterium we now call Yersinia pestis, the bubonic plague. It began in Egypt in 541 AD and rapidly spread like wildfire. And we really shouldn't frame this as mere bad luck. This was an overwhelming force of nature. It was a soldier sent from heaven that no human ambition, no fortress wall, and absolutely no amount of wealth could ever stop. The age of excessive human prosperity and total arrogance was over, and the punishment had officially arrived.
Section 4. The Plague Strikes Constantinople.
By the spring of 542 AD, the horror reached the imperial capital. I was there, guys, and I can tell you firsthand that the bustling, vibrant heart of the empire turned into an absolute ghost town practically overnight. Society just came to a grinding halt. The disease struck with this terrifying unpredictability that completely defied all human logic. First, you get a sudden fever, but strangely, without raising the body's temperature. Then came the horrific bubonic swellings in the groin or armpits, and the mental toll, just as bad. Some people fell into these deep, death-like comas, while others were seized by violent madness, literally screaming and running through the empty streets. For some, death was instant the very moment black blisters appeared. Others vomited blood and collapsed. No doctor could explain it. The people who were completely expected to live ended up dying, and those the doctors gave up on somehow miraculously survived. It was beyond terrifying.
So the crucial point is the sheer unimaginable scale of the devastation. 10,000. That was the daily death toll in Constantinople at the absolute peak of the plague. Let that sink in for a second. That's enough to wipe out entire modern neighborhoods every single day. Up to half of the entire city's population was gone. Wiped out. The graveyards filled up so quickly that there was simply nowhere left to bury the dead. The authorities actually became so desperate that they ripped the roofs off the city's defensive watchtowers, packed the rotting corpses inside like sardines, and sealed them back up. The smell of death just hung over the entire capital.
Section 5. Paranoia and the hero's betrayal.
Now, amidst all this divine wrath, the absolute ugliness of human nature just floated right to the surface. Even Emperor Justinian caught the plague, and while he lay there dying, the generals stationed over in Syria began whispering among themselves about who would take the throne if he perished. Well, word of this reached the capital. Justinian miraculously recovers, but Empress Theodora, his wife, was completely consumed by sheer paranoia. She heard rumors that Belisarius, the very general who had saved their empire time and time again, wouldn't support a new emperor chosen without him. Despite the fact that Belisarius was entirely loyal and literally just waiting for his orders, Theodora's assumptions completely took over. She painted him as this treasonous plotter seeking the throne. And without a single shred of actual proof, she systematically ruined him. She destroyed his pristine reputation, stripped him of his military command, confiscated his massive wealth, and scattered his loyal bodyguards.
Section 6. The Reward of Loyalty.
Let's move on and see how this builds, because the fallout is insane. The reward for Rome's absolute greatest general was to live in total disgrace as a private citizen in Constantinople. But, arrogance always has a price. Without Belisarius, the empire completely fell apart. The plague had already totally obliterated the economy and the tax base. Then, a cascading series of military disasters struck. The Romans suffered a humiliating defeat in Armenia. Down in North Africa, Justinian's governors were slaughtered by Berber rebels. And the ultimate disaster happened in Italy, where the Ostrogoths, led by King Totila, violently retook almost all the land Belisarius had previously conquered, even threatening Rome itself. The empire was quite literally burning to the ground.
So of course panic sets in. A totally desperate Justinian was forced to crawl right back to the very man he had so viciously disgraced. He ordered Belisarius back into the field to save Italy. But here is the ultimate tragic irony of the whole situation. Justinian outright refused to give him any veteran troops or state funding. Unbelievable, right? Yet Belisarius faithfully marched back to war, completely underfunded and vastly underappreciated. He was literally forced to hire 4,000 raw, untrained recruits out of his own diminished personal pocket just to fight a vastly superior enemy.
Which brings us to the end of our dark tale, and it leaves me with a deeply philosophical question for you. If this is the ultimate fate of the absolute greatest commander an empire has ever seen, disgraced, robbed, and then sent out to die with hired mercenaries for an ungrateful ruler,
Is unquestioning loyalty to arrogant men really worth the price? Or does this entire story just prove what we said at the start? That true power doesn't reside in emperors and armies, but in the divine will that orchestrates this entire universe. Think about the dark comedy of politics and the terrifying limits of human power, and let me know your answer in the comments. Thanks for joining me in this explainer.